Whoa! So you thought All-Star Weekend was just going to be about the glitz, the fun, the sneakers, and the three-point contest? Absolutely not. This is a WNBA, baby, and where there's pressure, there's drama. But this time, the spotlight wasn't on the dunks, the stats, or even the game itself. No, this time, the headline came from something way messier, way juicier, and way more revealing. Kelsey Plum, in a moment that felt less like a team rally and more like a mean girl might drop, decided to name names. Specifically, she called out Caitlin Clark's camp for missing a key pre-game meeting. If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe. One centered around player unity and the ongoing push for better pay. Let's be real. This was supposed to be a moment of solidarity. A powerful, shared message from the league's best. Players had shirts ready. Slogans prepped. Pay us what you owe us was a rallying cry. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect. But then, Kelsey opened her mouth. And just like that, the All-Star press conference went from a call to action to a call-out in front of reporters, cameras, fans. She didn't just hint. She didn't generalize. She basically said, certain people didn't show up. Certain people didn't wear the shirt. You know who you are. And if there was any doubt about who she meant, oh, please, there was no doubt. Because while Caitlin Clark wasn't even playing, still recovering from that nagging injury, her name, still front and center. She wasn't the game, but somehow she was still the game. Let's pause here, because this is the moment everything cracked. What was meant to be a unified front among the league's brightest stars quickly turned into a messy display of internal division. You could see it on the faces of the other players. The side eyes, the awkward smiles, the silence. Because here's the thing. Nobody wanted to be the one to clean up Kelsey's mess. And Caitlin? She said nothing. At least not right away. She let the media swirl. Let the internet speculate. Let the think pieces pile up. And while some fans were quick to blame her, others immediately saw it for what it was. Another WNBA player taking a shot at the one rookie who's already become the face of the league. Another thinly veiled jab, wrapped in the disguise of just being honest. And yet, Caitlin didn't respond with a quote, a statement, or even a tweet. Nope. She responded with an Instagram comment. Simple, sharp, surgical. She dropped a photo from her Nike partnership shoot. The caption? Just a few subtle words. Always show up where it counts. Hashtag just do it. No tags. No mentions. But everyone knew what that meant. And just like that, the entire tone shifted. Because Caitlin Clark, in her quietest moment, had just delivered the loudest message. You want to question my commitment? Check the jersey sales. Check the TV ratings. Check the empty seats when I'm not playing. Check the brands fighting over my name. She shows up every day, every game, every camera. But she also knows when to stay silent and let other people dig their own holes. Because here's what Kelsey Plum got wrong. She thought this was about a shirt. Caitlin knows it's about the system. The system that drags her into every conversation, even when she's not in the room. The system that profits off her name, sells out arenas when she's on the schedule, builds narratives around her every move, and then lets it get dragged by the very players she's helping lift. And that's the most brutal part, isn't it? The league needs Caitlin Clark more than they'd ever admit. She is, undeniably, the biggest ticket seller in the WNBA. When she announced she'd missed the All-Star game, ticket prices plummeted. We're talking 50% drops. Entire seating charts being reevaluated. And still, despite the proof, despite the numbers, despite the obvious impact, there's this undercurrent of resentment from within. Kelsey's call-out wasn't about one meeting. It was about control, about someone, anyone, reminding the world that Caitlin Clark isn't untouchable, that she still has dues to pay, that she's not above the culture that came before her. But here's the twist. Caitlin never said she was. In fact, she's done the opposite. She's deferred to veterans. She's avoided drama. She's stuck to her game. She's taken hits, literal and metaphorical, and kept her head down. And yet the backlash, It never stops. So when Kelsey Plum tried to make her the villain of All-Star Weekend, it didn't land like she hoped. It backfired. Hard. Fans weren't buying it. They saw through it. The narrative flipped almost overnight. What started as, why didn't Caitlyn's team support the movement, quickly became, why is every conversation still about her? And more importantly, why does the league keep using Caitlin Clark's star power to boost visibility, only to let her get roasted by her peers in real time? Let's be honest, it's awkward. You've got players wearing the same uniform, sharing the same stage, but operating in completely different realities. On one side, you have a tight-knit group of veterans who've been in the trenches, fighting for pay, visibility, and respect long before Caitlyn was even a prospect. And on the other, a 22-year-old phenom who's being asked to represent an entire movement before she's even played a full season. That's not competition. That's structural imbalance. And Caitlyn's Instagram response? That wasn't just a clapback. That was a recalibration. She reminded everyone that her lane is performance, that her loyalty is to the game, not the politics, that while others are chasing headlines, she's focused on legacy. And that's what makes her dangerous. She doesn't need to throw shade. She doesn't need to name names. She just needs to keep playing, keep winning, keep showing up. Because with every no-look pass, every deep three, every jersey that sells out in minutes, she's doing what no other WNBA player has been able to do in years, bring the game to the mainstream. And maybe that's what stings. Maybe it's hard to accept that someone so new, so young, so different is the one who finally tipped the scale. But that's not Caitlyn's fault. That's the system's fault. For failing to uplift everyone sooner. For waiting until there was a Caitlin Clark to finally invest in the league's growth. For dragging its feet until it had no choice but to evolve. So if there's tension, if there's awkwardness, if players like Kelsey Plum feel like they've been overlooked or underappreciated, it's not Caitlin Clark's job to fix that. It's the WNBA's. But until the league figures out how to balance that weight, how to protect its stars without alienating its veterans, how to build unity without creating scapegoats, this won't be the last viral moment like this. The pressure will keep building. The camera will keep panning to Caitlyn. And every mismeeting, every passive-aggressive quote, every social media move will get amplified tenfold. Because when you're the biggest name in the game, even on the bench, you're never really out of play. And Caitlin Clark? She knows that better than anyone. She didn't skip the moment. She rewrote it. Here's the reality that few people are willing to say out loud. What we saw during that All-Star Weekend wasn't just a teammate taking a jab or a joke landing flat. It was the crack in the foundation. For years, the WNBA has been clawing for attention, fighting for headlines, ratings, merchandise sales, TV deals, and respect in a sports world that barely looked in their direction. Then Caitlin Clark showed up, and suddenly, everyone started looking. All the networks that ignored prime WNBA matchups started featuring them. Jersey sales exploded. Arena seats that were once empty were selling out days in advance. The media, once asleep on the league, was waking up, and they were looking directly at Caitlin Clark. And if you don't think that created tension in locker rooms, you're not paying attention. Because for veterans like Kelsey Plum, who've been grinding for years without the same spotlight, that sudden shift wasn't just jarring, it was infuriating. You could see it written all over her face at that press conference. This wasn't just about a skipped meeting. This was about resentment. Deep, uncomfortable, bubbling up from the bottom kind of resentment. The kind that comes from watching someone else become the face of a movement you've been part of for a decade. And you know what? That resentment is understandable. But where it all went wrong, where it always goes wrong, is when it gets directed sideways. When the finger gets pointed not at the system or the league or the media gatekeepers, but at the person who simply walked in and did her job better than anyone expected. Caitlin Clark didn't ask to be a savior. She didn't ask to be the face of a revolution. She just hooped. That's it. But because of her talent, her timing, and her appeal to a wider audience, she became the focal point of a storm the league had been brewing for years. And when that storm finally cracked open on All-Star Weekend, she was the one left standing in the eye of it. Again, not Kelsey, not the commissioner, not the coaches. Caitlin, And what did she do? She said nothing. She didn't clap back with a post-game interview. She didn't post a cryptic TikTok. She didn't get emotional. She waited. Then she dropped a casual, savage, Nike-branded comment that said everything without saying anything. Always show up where it counts. That one sentence sent 1,000 messages. It said, I know you're talking about me. It said, I don't need to explain myself to you. And it said, by the way, I'm still the only one on this court with a solo Nike deal, and I didn't need a press conference to get it. That a level of media savvy you just don't see in rookies. Actually, you barely see it in veterans. Caitlin has somehow mastered the rare art of staying quiet while owning the room. Because while other players are busy making noise, she's focused on results. You think it's a coincidence that ticket prices tanked the minute she was ruled out of All-Star Weekend? It's not. You think it's random that the biggest brands, Nike, Gatorade, State Farm, are lining up to work with her before she's even played a full season? It's not. The Caitlin Clark effect is real, and everyone knows it. They just don't know how to deal with it. And that's the real story behind Kelsey Plum's comment. It wasn't just frustration. It was fear. Fear that the league is changing too fast. Fear that the old rules no longer apply. Fear that Caitlin Clark isn't just a moment. She's a movement. And that movement is happening with or without the approval of the old guard. And let's talk about that old guard for a minute. The WNBA has always had its inner circle, its unwritten rules, its gatekeepers. And Caitlin? She didn't knock on the door and wait to be let in. She kicked it off the hinges and walked through with a camera crew and a highlight reel trailing behind her. That's not arrogance. That's power. And power always makes people uncomfortable, especially when it shows up in the hands of someone new, young, and unbothered. So now the question is this. What happens next? Does Kelsey Plum apologize? Probably not. Does Caitlin fire back more directly? Also probably not. But what will happen, what's already happening, is that the league is going to have to choose, not between players, not between rookies and veterans, but between the old model and the new reality. Because the truth is, Caitlin Clark isn't going anywhere. She's not a trend. She's not a phase. She's the future. And the faster the league, and yes, the players, accept that, the better it'll be for everyone. Because here's the part they're missing. This doesn't have to be a competition. Caitlin's rise doesn't mean Kelsey's fall. One player's spotlight doesn't dim another's, unless you let it. If the league embraced her fully instead of letting the jealousy fester behind the scenes, if veterans helped usher in a new era instead of side-eyeing it, if players unified instead of divided, imagine what the WNBA could actually become, a place where the next Maya Moore and the next Caitlin Clark could coexist, a league where veterans mentor rookies instead of my checking them at press conferences, a space where everyone wins, because fans are engaged, brands are investing, and respect is being shared instead of guarded. But for now, that's still a dream, because the tension is still simmering, the jealousy is still lingering, and Caitlin? She's still smiling, still silent, still showing up where it counts. And when the next game tips off, the cameras will be back on her, the crowd will be louder, the tickets will be pricier, and the numbers? They'll be climbing again. Because the Caitlin Clark story isn't a story about one player. It's a story about an entire league being forced to confront its reflection and decide whether it wants to grow, evolve, and thrive, or sit in a press conference and complain that the future didn't ask for permission before arriving. But here's the catch. Not everyone wants to get in the car. Kelsey Plum's call-out wasn't just a one-off soundbite. It was a flare gun fired straight into the sky, signaling the uncomfortable truth everyone's been whispering behind the scenes. The league is fractured, not in talent, not in potential, but in attitude. Because let's be honest, there are two WNBAs right now. One is the old guard, the players who spent years grinding in near anonymity, who've endured the charter flight drama, the empty arenas, the laughable media coverage, the ones who've been shouting into the void for support, recognition, and a living wage while being told to wait their turn. And then there's the new wave, the NIL-bred rookies, the media darlings, The ones who walked into the league with major sponsors, national headlines, and viral fan bases before they even stepped on a professional court. Caitlin Clark didn't just walk into that world. She was the world. And while fans embraced her, while brands sprinted to write checks, while media outlets finally tuned in, the locker room started getting colder. Not because Caitlin did anything wrong, but because the league changed around her. You could feel it at All-Star Weekend. It wasn't just Kelsey Plum's words. It was the energy, the side conversations, the awkward vibes, the silence when Clark's name came up. This wasn't about a missed T-shirt. This was about a missed opportunity to show unity. Instead, it turned into the opposite, a display of cracks in facade that the WNBA has worked so hard to polish. Think about it. Caitlin Clark was injured. She wasn't playing. She didn't give a quote. She didn't even speak. And somehow, she was still the headline. Why? Because people care. Because her presence or her absence moves numbers, moves narratives, moves everything. That's not hype. That's impact. And for players who spent a decade being told, no one watches women's sports, watching the league bend itself into a Caitlin-shaped frame is understandably frustrating. It's like waiting for a bus that never comes, only to watch someone else arrive in a private jet. But here's where it gets complicated. Caitlin didn't build the jet. She just boarded it. She didn't create the media obsession. She didn't control the sponsorship climate. She didn't bribe ESPN into covering her practices. She just performed. And when the cameras followed her into the league, the WNBA finally got what it had been begging for, visibility. But with that visibility came resentment. It's the paradox no one wants to talk about. The league needed a breakout star. But when it got one, the internal politics couldn't handle the weight. Because once Caitlin showed up, the bar moved. The fan expectations rose. The ticket prices rose. The level of scrutiny rose. Suddenly, playing solid ball wasn't enough. You had to entertain, trend, deliver. And for some players, that's exhausting. For others, that's threatening. So when Kelsey Plum made that comment about Caitlin's camp missing the shirt meeting, it wasn't really about who wore what. It was about control. About reminding everyone that there's still a hierarchy. That star or not, rookie or not, there are rules here. But Caitlin, she didn't come to follow rules. She came to rewrite them. And she's doing it without asking for permission. That's what makes her so dangerous, so divisive, so important. She's not playing to the culture of respect your elders if that respect isn't mutual. She's not bowing to unwritten traditions that are more about ego than empowerment. She's not playing the media game. She's winning it without even speaking. That subtle Instagram comment, that was a masterclass in restraint and precision. No need for a notes app apology or a messy quote war. Just a clean, branded reminder that she's not sweating the noise. Because while others are busy keeping score off the court, Caitlin Clark is still leading the league in assists. She's still bringing new fans into the building. Still pulling up from the logo like it's a layup. Still proving that she belongs. Not just as a player, but as a pillar of what the league is becoming. And let's talk about that fan base for a second, because this is another piece people are terrified to admit. Caitlin Clark's audience is different. Bigger, broader, louder. She didn't just bring Iowa fans. She brought America's attention. The Midwest, the suburbs, the casual sports dads, the TikTok crowd. People who had never watched a WNBA game are now fully invested in the Fever schedule. You think that's by accident? That's business. That's brand. And that's exactly why her teammates should be protecting her, not picking at her. Because when Caitlin wins, the whole league wins. When she trends, the WNBA gains followers. When she pulls in endorsements, salaries get leverage. When she fills arenas, everyone's paycheck goes up. But instead of rallying around her as a force multiplier, some players are treating her like an invader, a trespasser in a house they helped build. And that's the core of the discomfort, isn't it? It's not that Caitlin's bad for the league. It's that she showed up and immediately became essential. That kind of fast-track success is rare. And in sports, it's almost always met with resistance. But here's what people forget. Caitlin didn't skip steps. She earned this. She took a mid-tier college program and turned it into a national phenomenon. She shattered records, broke viewing numbers, played more minutes in college than some veterans have played in their WNBA careers. She's not an overnight sensation. She's a once-in-a-generation problem for defenses, and now, apparently, for some of her peers. But here's the twist. She's not mad. She's not emotional. She's not spiraling. She's just still here, still showing up, still giving fans what they paid for, still being professional, polished, and unshakable. And if the league doesn't start protecting her, if they keep letting players take public shots, letting broadcasters spin stories without consequence, letting the culture of bitterness take root, they'll lose more than Caitlin Clark. They'll lose the moment. Because what Caitlin brings isn't just momentum, it's movement. And movement, once it starts rolling, doesn't stop to wait for feelings. It keeps going, with you or without you. So to the Kelseys of the league, to the unnamed players throwing subtle shade, to the media folks trying to pit rookie versus vet, be careful, because while you're busy pointing fingers, Caitlin Clark is already miles ahead, and she's not looking back.